Lewis Hamilton may have just exposed the brutal truth Ferrari desperately hoped nobody would notice. Because after Canada, Ferrari celebrated a massive podium, while quietly admitting they still cannot compete with Mercedes where it matters most. Straight-line speed. And once Hamilton said those words publicly, the entire Formula One paddock started paying attention. This was supposed to be Ferrari's breakthrough weekend. Hamilton looked incredible. Second place in Montreal. An epic late fight against Max Verstappen. The happiest he has sounded since joining Ferrari. But then came the radio messages and post-race comments that changed the entire story. We need to take a step forward to keep up on the straights. The deficit is there. That was not frustration. That was confirmation. And according to reports after Canada, Ferrari may already be down between 22 and 25 horsepower compared to Mercedes. In modern Formula One, that is catastrophic. Especially under the brutal new 2026 regulations where electrical deployment controls huge parts of acceleration and race pace. Now the FIA is closely monitoring Ferrari's position through the ADUO development system, the mechanism designed to help manufacturers falling behind in engine performance. Think about how humiliating that sounds for Ferrari, the most legendary engine manufacturer in Formula One history, potentially needing technical recovery support just to survive the championship fight. But this story becomes even more uncomfortable inside the Ferrari garage, because while Hamilton celebrated his best Ferrari result yet, Charles Leclerc was emotionally collapsing on the other side of the team. Leclerc described Canada as one of the worst weekends of his entire Formula One career. No tire confidence, no brake feeling, no trust in the car. At one point, he admitted he felt like he was going to crash at every corner because the tires never entered the correct operating window. And suddenly, Ferrari looked like two completely different realities inside the same garage. One driver finally unlocking the SF-26, the other completely lost inside it, which creates the terrifying question now spreading across the paddock. What if the real problem is not Hamilton finally improving? What if the SF-26 itself is fundamentally broken in ways Ferrari still cannot fully understand? From the outside, Canada looked like Ferrari's best weekend in months. Lewis Hamilton smiling again, a podium finish, an incredible battle against Max Verstappen. And for the first time since arriving in Maranello, Hamilton genuinely sounded comfortable inside the SF-26. That alone was huge for Ferrari, because for most of the season, the story around Hamilton had been frustration. Too disconnected from a car, too uncomfortable with the balance, too inconsistent during race weekends. But suddenly in Montreal, everything looked different. Hamilton started fifth on the grid, stayed patient during the chaotic opening laps, then completely transformed the race after the safety car triggered by George Russell's retirement. Ferrari reacted instantly. The pit stop strategy was perfect. The timing was aggressive. And once Hamilton switched onto the hard tires, the pace suddenly came alive. Lap after lap, he started hunting Max Verstappen down. The gap dropped from more than 3 seconds to under 1 second. Then came DRS range. Then came pressure. And finally, with only 6 laps remaining, Hamilton attacked around the outside into turn 1 and completed one of the cleanest overtakes of the entire season. That moment mattered emotionally far more than people realize. Because after the race, Hamilton sounded genuinely relieved. He called it the happiest day of his Ferrari career so far. Not the most important, not the most emotional, the happiest. And that sentence revealed something critical. For the first time, Hamilton feels like he finally understands the SF-26. He openly admitted he now feels much more comfortable with the car and finally understands how to optimize its performance properly. That sounds positive. But here's where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable for Ferrari. Because while Hamilton was finally connecting with the car, Charles Leclerc was experiencing the exact opposite. Leclerc later described Canada as one of the worst weekends of his entire Formula One career. That is an extraordinary statement from a driver of his level, especially at a circuit where he normally performs comfortably. And the details behind his frustration were even more alarming. The tires never entered the correct temperature window. The brakes never felt predictable. The balance never inspired confidence. Think about trying to sprint while wearing shoes that constantly slide sideways. No matter how talented the runner is, confidence disappears immediately. That is basically what Leclerc was describing. At one point after the race, he admitted he felt like he was going to crash at almost every corner because the tires felt completely disconnected from car. And suddenly, Ferrari looked like two completely different teams sharing the same garage. One driver finally unlocking the SF-26, the other unable to trust it at all. That difference immediately created dangerous questions inside the paddock, because Formula One cars are designed around consistency. When one elite driver looks comfortable while the other looks emotionally broken in the exact same machinery, teams start worrying about deeper structural problems, especially under completely new regulations. And Ferrari already has one major issue hanging over the entire project. The simulator data still does not fully correlate with the real car on track. That sounds technical, but imagine preparing for a video game using one set of controls, then arriving at the competition and discovering the controls react completely differently. Everything feels unpredictable. That may now be happening inside Ferrari. And this is where Hamilton's comments suddenly become even more important. Because despite finishing second and sounding happier than ever, Hamilton still admitted Ferrari has a major straight-line speed deficit compared to Mercedes. That changes everything. Because if the car still lacks raw power even during Ferrari's strongest weekend of the season, then the real problem may be far deeper than setup or confidence. And this is where Ferrari's entire situation suddenly starts looking much more serious than a normal performance deficit. Because Canada exposed a problem that podiums alone cannot hide anymore. The SF-26 may only work properly under extremely specific conditions. And if that is true, Ferrari is in real trouble. Think about what happened across the two sides of the garage. Hamilton looked smooth, calm on the tires, comfortable under braking, aggressive during the final stint against Verstappen. Meanwhile, Leclerc spent the entire weekend fighting the car itself, not rival drivers. The car. That difference should terrify Ferrari engineers, because when one driver can suddenly unlock pace while the other completely loses confidence, it often means the setup window is dangerously narrow. In simple terms, the car only behaves correctly inside a tiny operating range, like trying to balance a pencil standing upright on your finger. Everything works perfectly for a moment, then collapses instantly if the balance shifts even slightly. That may now be happening with the SF-26. And the new 2026 regulations only make that problem worse. The hybrid systems are more aggressive than ever. The tire windows are more sensitive. The electrical deployment systems demand perfect balance between cooling, energy recovery, and traction, which means one small setup mistake can completely destroy confidence. That seems to be exactly what happened to Leclerc. He openly admitted the tires never reached the proper operating temperature all weekend. That sounds small. It isn't, because Formula One tires are extremely temperature sensitive. Too cold, and the car slides unpredictably. Too hot, and grip disappears completely. Imagine trying to write neatly while wearing frozen gloves. That is basically what driving a Formula One car feels like when the tires sit outside the correct window. And once confidence disappears at this level, drivers stop attacking naturally. Every braking zone feels risky. Every corner entry feels unstable. That is why Leclerc's comments after the race sounded so emotional. He admitted he never had a single lap where the car felt normal. Not one lap. That is extraordinary, especially from a driver who historically adapts extremely quickly to difficult cars. And this is where the contrast with Hamilton becomes incredibly important, because Hamilton did not deny Ferrari's problems after the race. Actually, he confirmed them publicly. He openly admitted Ferrari still cannot match Mercedes on the straights and that the power deficit remains very real. That sentence may become one of the defining moments of Ferrari's season, because when a seven-time world champion publicly admits the car lacks power, the entire paddock immediately believes the issue is serious. And according to reports after Canada, Ferrari may already be down between 22 and 25 horsepower compared to Mercedes. That is massive in modern Formula One, especially because the gap appears structural, not temporary. In other words, this is not something Ferrari can simply solve with a better setup or a different wing configuration. The problem may be built directly into the power unit itself. And this is where the FIA suddenly becomes extremely important, because now all eyes are turning toward the ADUO system, the Adjusted Development Unlock Order, a mechanism designed to help manufacturers falling behind under the new engine regulations. Think about how serious that sounds for Ferrari, the most iconic engine brand in Formula One history, potentially needing development assistance to stay competitive. That is almost unthinkable. But Canada may have pushed Ferrari directly toward that reality, because while Hamilton's podium looked emotional and positive on the surface, the bigger picture underneath was much darker. Mercedes gained even more ground in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari still brought no upgrades to Montreal. and the internal balance between Hamilton and Leclerc suddenly feels emotionally unstable. One driver feels connected to the future of the car, the other feels completely abandoned by it. And once those emotional differences start growing inside Formula One teams, pressure builds extremely fast, especially at Ferrari, because Ferrari does not operate like a normal team. Every weakness becomes national news. Every driver comment becomes political. Every technical issue becomes emotional. And now, after Canada, Ferrari faces a terrifying possibility. What if Hamilton's podium was not proof the SF-26 is improving? What if it was simply one extraordinary driver temporarily overcoming problems the car still fundamentally cannot solve? And this is where the entire Ferrari project starts entering dangerous territory. Because after Canada, the biggest question is no longer whether the SF-26 can occasionally fight for podiums. The real question is whether Ferrari actually understands the car at all. That sounds extreme, but look at the evidence from Montreal. Hamilton finally looked comfortable. Leclerc looked completely lost. And Ferrari itself admitted there is still a major inconsistency between both sides of the garage. That is not normal inside a top Formula One team, especially not this deep into a season. And Frederic Vasseur practically confirmed it after the race when he admitted Ferrari still needs to understand why the two drivers experience the same circuits so differently. That sentence may have revealed more than Ferrari intended, because in Formula One, teams usually know exactly why one driver struggles more than another. Different driving styles, different setup preferences, different tire management techniques. But Canada felt different. This looked like two completely different realities inside the same car. And the consequences of that are enormous. Because if Ferrari still does not fully understand why the SF-26 behaves unpredictably from one setup direction to another, then future development becomes incredibly risky. Think about trying to repair a watch while blindfolded. You might accidentally improve something, or you might make the problem worse without realizing it. That is basically the danger Ferrari now faces heading into middle of the season, especially because the rest of the grid is evolving aggressively. Mercedes brought major upgrades to Canada and immediately looked dominant. McLaren continues developing. Red Bull continues evolving. Ferrari brought nothing new to Montreal, and that decision suddenly feels incredibly expensive. Because while Hamilton produced a brilliant individual performance, the bigger championship picture became brutal. Mercedes increased the constructors' gap from 68 points to 98 in a single weekend. That is the kind of gap that changes the emotional pressure inside Maranello instantly. Every race now feels urgent. Every failed setup experiment matters. Every weak qualifying session becomes dangerous. And underneath all of this sits the biggest fear Ferrari cannot easily solve: the engine deficit. Hamilton's comments after the race confirmed what many people inside the paddock already suspected. Ferrari simply does not have the same straight-line power as Mercedes right now. And under the new 2026 regulations, that weakness becomes devastating. Because these cars rely heavily on hybrid deployment systems during acceleration zones. The stronger the electrical deployment, the more efficient the overtaking opportunities become. Mercedes appears to have mastered that system earlier than everyone else. Ferrari has not, and according to reports after Canada, the deficit may be structural, not temporary. Structural. That means Ferrari may need actual development intervention through the ADUO system just to close the gap during the season. That possibility carries huge political consequences, because Ferrari's identity inside Formula One has always been connected to power, speed, engines, straight-line dominance. Now suddenly, the team may officially be one of the manufacturers needing technical assistance to recover performance. That changes how rivals see Ferrari immediately. And internally, the emotional pressure between Hamilton and Leclerc could become even more complicated moving forward. Because now Hamilton looks increasingly comfortable with the direction of the project. Meanwhile, Leclerc looks emotionally exhausted. After the race, he openly blamed himself while also admitting the car never entered a usable operating window all weekend. That combination is dangerous, because once drivers start blaming themselves for problems they cannot fully control, confidence usually drops even further. And Formula One drivers rely on confidence more than almost anything else. A confident driver attacks corners instinctively. A doubtful driver hesitates for half a second. At this level, half a second feels enormous. And now Ferrari heads toward Monaco with a strange emotional balance inside the team. Hamilton optimistic. Leclerc searching for answers. The engineers under pressure. an entire paddock watching closely to see whether Canada was a breakthrough or a warning sign hidden underneath a podium celebration.